Puerto Rico has been a U.S. territory for over 100 years, and right now reports have come out that Donald Trump may grant Puerto Rico's independence. There are claims out there that the U.S. would save $617 billion if they did it. But is this really going to happen? And what would it mean for the real estate and real estate investors on the island of Puerto Rico? Guys, I've done over 200 deals on the island of Puerto Rico, and I got to tell you, this is a bad idea. I'm going to break down exactly why, and I'm going to tell you what it could mean for the housing market. Let's get into it. There's news outlets out there like the Daily Mail and some other social media outlets, no one big and no one that matters, are claiming that someone inside the Trump organization, although he's unnamed and not real, are stating that the U.S. could save $617 billion if they cut the island of Puerto Rico loose. Apparently, someone's trying to pressure Donald Trump to consider this ludicrous idea. And let's be real, guys. Donald Trump's a businessman. While businessmen like cutting costs, but this isn't some random itemized line on a spreadsheet. This isn't some waste, abuse, or fraud. This is millions of people's lives that we're dealing with. And although there may be some waste, abuse, and fraud in the government of Puerto Rico or on the island of Puerto Rico, this isn't what we're talking about here. It seems like this is probably just political noise. Let's talk about what this would mean for real estate in the real world and the island of Puerto Rico. So what are the pros? Because yeah, maybe there are some. I just don't think there are many. And before I completely rip this idea apart, let's try to be fair and think about what good could come of it. Theoretically, some pros are economic autonomy. Puerto Rico could create its own tax system and try to attract foreign investors and cut through some of the U.S. bureaucracy, which is tourism growth potential. Number two, tourism growth potential. If Puerto Rico is to play its cards right, they could double down on tourism and possibly even becoming an independent Caribbean tax haven. And number three, they'd get their cultural independence back. And some people would like this idea just to have Puerto Rico be independent so that they could have national pride. So guys, we put this in the pros list. All of these were 3 pros, but all this shit takes time. And what I just described is what island already has. We are a tax haven in the Caribbean with a U.S. passport, by the way. We do have the backing of the United States government, so you'd lose that. Who comes in? Who are those foreign investors that come and swoop in if you lose the United States of America? Is it China? And is Donald Trump really prepared to let that happen? What's more likely to happen, unfortunately, if this thing did happen and it happened quickly, then prices would probably fall. People would be leaving the island to get into the United States. The massive amount of exodus would cause a population decrease and brain drain again, and the island would fall into chaos and depression. Let me give you the cons, and you can probably already tell that I'm against this, right? So, if Puerto Rico becomes suddenly independent, the real estate market is going to get absolutely destroyed, and here's why. There'd likely be economic collapse or at least some real hardships and massive depression. Right now, Puerto Rico gets billions in U.S. federal aid. We get Social Security, Medicare, disaster relief. That's huge. Even infrastructure spending. And we all know the infrastructure still needs more to be spent on it, but the U.S. pays for it. You name it. If you cut all of that off, unemployment is going to go through the frickin' roof. Businesses are going to be boarded up and shut down, and people are going to panic. I think you're going to see fire sales. They're going to start selling properties fast and at a loss, and they're going to exit stage left. Many people will decide to move to the U.S. And a massive exodus is going to equal a massive surplus housing. And guys, we know this is true because Puerto Rico already has a massive problem with people leaving for the mainland and caused a brain drain over the last several decades. And if independence actually were to happen, how many people are going to stick around? How many families would you see packing up and moving to Florida and New York and Texas? And if that happened, you'd be looking at a massive oversupply of homes. You'd see the bottom fall out of the real estate market. Would investors even buy those cheap houses, not knowing whether or not there's going to be a stable economy? I think that's pretty clear that they wouldn't. And here's a big one, guys. With no more U.S. backup, that means no more U.S. safety net. And the next time the storm of a century hits the island, who's there to bail them out? And here's something a lot of people don't even realize. Right now, Puerto Rico still has the U.S. dollar, the U.S. banking, and U.S. property right protections. And if Puerto Rico becomes independent, will it keep the dollar or does it switch to something way less stable? And what about the banking? If investors can't safely get their money in and out, that's going to be a deal breaker. And again, without those protections, the real estate market is just going to go into a nosedive free fall. So guys, this is not just some minor policy shift. This would fundamentally change the real estate market, and not in a good way. So who wins and who loses if this happens? In every crisis, the few will win, but most will lose. The winners are going to be opportunistic investors, because if the market tanks, you're going to be able to scoop up properties dirt cheap, and all you're going to need is have the guts to take the risk. Developers with deep pockets would also win. Those that take the risk, if Puerto Rico somehow stabilizes nicely, they're going to have a huge win at the end of it. But that is an extreme long play, guys. You got to have big cojones for this. Who are the losers? The homeowners, the families, the local people on the island. If you own some property in PR, if you've got your house here and maybe you're living in the States, anybody who's a short-term real estate investor, business people are going to lose. Again, the local population is going to suffer. If you lose the backing of the United States for the island of Puerto Rico, the market is just going to go to hell. There's going to be so much uncertainty. There's going to be panic in the streets. It's not going to look good, especially for the locals. So unless you're prepared to gamble with your money, this won't be a win for most people. Here are my final takes on what investors should do. So is this even really going to happen? My short answer: no. Politicians love throwing out wild ideas, but independence isn't something that you can just declare overnight. And Puerto Rico's had multiple referendums, and the majority of voters have consistently either wanted statehood or have wanted to continue to be a commonwealth. Plus, Congress would have to sign off on this. And let's be honest, that ain't happening. So what should you do as a real estate investor? Don't panic. This is almost certainly just political talk. Keep your eye open for market shifts. And if panic causes a dip in the market, that might be a good opportunity for you to swoop in and buy something. And stick to stable areas. Continue to focus on the high demand areas on the island like tourism and rental hubs, the metro area. Bottom line, this would be bad news for real estate markets and real estate investors and the local population, but I really don't see this happening. And if it does, brace yourself, because it's going to get messy. What do you think? Should Puerto Rico become independent? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if it did become independent, would you still invest here? Thanks for watching. Watch this next. God bless.